Hello, guys. Welcome back to the Idle Park Talk Show. It seems like the world has gone back to where it was before February 28, 2026, the day the United States and Israel launched what they described as preemptive strikes against the Islamic Republic of Iran. On June 14, 2026, President Donald J. Trump, in his usual fashion, took to social media and announced that a deal has been reached between the United States and Iran. He congratulated all parties involved and declared that the Strait of Hormuz would be reopened to all commercial traffic. Shortly afterwards, Iran's Fars news agency published a similar statement confirming the ceasefire, confirming the report. Pakistan Prime Minister also announced that the United States and Iran had reached a peace agreement and that a formal signing ceremony would take place in Switzerland on June the 19th. If that schedule holds, the official signing of this agreement is only a few days away. With both belligerents as well as their mediator Pakistan making similar comments, we can reasonably conclude that some form of memorandum of understanding exists between the United States and Iran, a framework from which a final peace agreement may eventually emerge. I say may because the actual content of this memorandum remains confidential. No official document outlining the terms and conditions have been released to the general public. Based on reporting available today, the Memorandum of Understanding appears to be a framework agreement rather than a final peace treaty. Its primary objectives are to halt active hostilities, open the Strait of Hormuz, and create a 60-day negotiation window during which both parties will attempt to reach a comprehensive agreement on the nuclear issue, sanctions relief, and broader regional security concerns. In many ways, this memorandum simply takes us back to the status quo that existed before Iran was attacked, back to a time when the Strait of Hormuz was largely irrelevant to most of the world's 8 billion people, back to a time when ships sailed through the strait without asking whether they were moving through national or international waters, back to a time when oil prices were low and the cost of living was considerably more manageable. In other words, the United States has managed to solve a problem that it created. It was only after Iran's sovereignty was violated that Tehran, through the IRGC, moved to regulate and restrict shipping through the Strait of Hormuz. As tension escalated, Washington responded by imposing strict restrictions on vessels traveling to and from Iranian ports. In many respects, the United States blockaded the blockade. After the loss of lives, the destruction of civilian infrastructure, the expenditure of billions of dollars in military assets, and weeks of instability in the global market, we appear to be back at square one. Iran still possesses approximately 450 kilograms of uranium enriched up to 60%. Its nuclear facilities remain intact. Its ballistic missiles capabilities have not been eliminated. The government in Tehran remains in power. In fact, some analysts argue that the current leadership is even more hardline than before. The United States and Israel, arguably two of the most powerful military forces in the world, were unable to compel Iran to surrender. Iran refuses to capitulate under military pressure. Instead, Iran discovered its most effective strategic weapon, the Strait of Hormuz. By leveraging its geographic position, Iran forced Washington back towards diplomacy and negotiation. Now, let me be clear. I am not suggesting that Iran is militarily equal to the United States. Far from it. If Washington had chosen to wage war in Iran the same way Israel has conducted operations in Gaza and southern Lebanon, it certainly possessed the capacity to inflict far greater destruction. But at what cost? Even after all that destruction, control of the Strait of Hormuz would remain a difficult challenge altogether. Fortunately, cooler heads appear to have recognized this reality before the conflict escalated any further. So let's take a look at some of the major issues reportedly addressed in this agreement. The first is an immediate ceasefire. Reports suggest that both sides have agreed to halt military operations. Some reports even indicate that discussions extend beyond Iran and the United States to include Israeli military activities in southern Lebanon. Iran has consistently argued that any sustainable peace arrangement cannot focus solely on Washington and Tehran. From the Iranian perspective, regional conflicts are interconnected. This may explain why Trump's announcement generated such strong reactions in Israel and amongst pro Israeli advocacy groups in the United States. Let's take a look at this June 15 press release from APAC. And I read, press release June 15, 2026. APEC statement on US-Iran Memorandum of Understanding announcement. For 47 years, the Iranian regime has been at war against America and its own people. Over the past year, at President Trump's direction, America has decimated Iran's leadership, nuclear program, and military assets. Working together with Israel, the US military carried out its mission and created the opportunity for a diplomatic agreement. The announced Memorandum of Understanding kicks off a new 60-day window for talks. We look forward to learning the full detail of the framework for these negotiations, including whether the deal preserves the sovereign rights of our democratic ally Israel to respond to security threats it confronts. Congress will play a critical role in working with the administration throughout these negotiations and reviewing the ultimate agreement. It must support efforts to maximize our diplomatic, economic, and military leverage to reach a final deal that permanently and verifiably ends the regime's nuclear program, including the removal of all enriched uranium from Iran and the dismantling of all enrichment sites. The final deal should also address Iran's illicit ballistic missiles and drones program and end the regime's financial terror groups that wreak havoc around the world. Well, that is what APAC had to say about this memorandum of understanding. You can see from the context that, yeah, though they might not be exactly happy with this memorandum of understanding, they express, of course, have expressed wishes for the American people, for the state of Israel, and also have started to lay down foundations under which this peace agreement can be derailed. First of all, talking about ballistic missiles, which is nothing, uh, which is nothing that comes up in the in the negotiations, and also laying down very strict rules with respect to Iran's nuclear program and with respect to sanctions. So That is APEC's position on the memorandum of understanding. Another major provision reportedly involves reopening the Strait of Hormuz and ending restrictions on Iranian maritime commerce. This is enormously significant because Hormuz remains one of the most important energy corridors on Earth. Enough has already been said about this narrow waterway, but make no mistake, it could ultimately determine whether this peace process succeeds or fails. My question for you is simple. Do you believe freedom of navigation will return to normal? Will the United States simply lift restrictions and walk away? Why would Iran willingly surrender the leverage that protects it throughout this conflict? In my view, Iran's geography has become its greatest strategic asset. Some commentators have even argued that the Strait of Hormuz is Iran's version of a nuclear deterrent without the nuclear waste. It provides Tehran with the ability to influence global economy without possessing any nuclear weapons. These are questions that both sides have to address if they hope to build a lasting peace. Now, several leaks several leaked provisions from the reported 14th clause memorandum have generated considerable attention. One claim suggests that reconstruction assistance would worth approximately 300 billion could be part of future negotiations. Whether that figure is accurate remains unclear. Nevertheless, political reactions have been intense. Let's hear what Vice President J.D. Vance had to say regarding reports of reconstruction funds.
Iranians are saying that they're going to have access to a $300 billion reconstruction fund. True or false?
Well, Ed, that's the sort of thing they could have access to, funded by the Gulf Coast Coalition, so long as they honor their end of the obligation. I think that one of the things you're going to see, Ed, and people have to be skeptical of this, is that the hardliners in the Iranian system will overemphasize the benefits that Iran gets while underemphasizing all the things that they have to concede and all the things they have to provide in order to get these benefits. So we absolutely are open to the Gulf Coast countries investing in the reconstruction of Iran, but only if Iran ends their nuclear program, ends their enriched stockpile of material, and is really open to an inspections and enforcement regime that gives the American people confidence they're never going to have a nuclear weapon. So I think the dance you're going to see, Ed, which is going to be interesting, is the Iranian media, especially the hardline media, they're going to talk a lot about what they get without talking about what they give. It's important for all of us to correct that record.
And I do agree with JD Vance. Both the United States and, of course, Iran are going to play this in a way that favors them. Some of this would be propaganda, if you want to call it so. Some of this would be, structured to appease their domestic audience. Just like J.D. Vance is saying that, oh, America is not going to be putting any money, or that Iran will only get the $300 billion if it meets certain conditions, right? This is J.D. Vance, telling the story in a manner that it suits their domestic audience. So people in the United States do not want their taxpayers money going to Iran to pay for a war that they did not really support, a war that they were not consulted on. So J.D. Vance is also presenting the story in a way that Americans find it appealing. Now he is saying that if Iran meets certain conditions, then other Gulf states may be willing to invest in the Iranian infrastructure and in the Iranian economy, right? This is not exactly how Iran is interpreting interpreting this $300 billion reparation fund. Iran, according to Iran, it's money that is due them as a result of this unwanted destruction of Iranian infrastructure. According to Iran, it is money that is due them for reconstruction of the infrastructures that were destroyed. So it seems to Iran as money that is owed, as opposed to uh, um, um, how JD Vance is putting it as money that they will get if certain conditions were met. I also kind of wanted us to take a minute and listen to what Marjorie Taylor Greene had to say with respect to the 200 billion that Iran might potentially get if this memorandum of understanding is signed, and if at the end of the day a peace treaty is arrived at. Again, the same argument is this 300 billion is presented in a way that appeases the American people, and Marjorie Taylor Greene is saying that if this is true, this money should not be taxpayers' money, because the taxpayers did not support the war, they were not consulted on the war. Let's take a minute and listen to Marjorie Taylor Greene.
So I'm reading today that in the U.S.-Iran proposed peace deal that is supposedly going to be signed later this week, this is after we've been told at least 38 to 40 times that there's going to be a peace deal, but supposedly there's one. There is an agreement that there will be $300 billion be given to Iran for reconstruction and investments for Iran. Now, I'm assuming this comes from the American taxpayer, and I want to tell you that's a bunch of bullshit. This is a war that Americans did not support. As a matter of fact, we said no more foreign wars, and that's what we voted for in 2024. Well, Trump decided to bomb Iran and go to war against Iran on behalf of his good friend Bibi Netanyahu in Israel, and he's on record saying that he did this for Israel, while he claimed that it was to stop Iran from having a nuclear weapon. By the way, former DNI Tulsi Gabbard told Congress that Iran was nowhere close to having a nuclear weapon, and so did other nuclear regulatory agencies, said Iran was nowhere close to having a nuclear weapon, but Trump went ahead and bombed them anyway. Well, this cost Americans approximately $2 billion a day and depleted much of our weapons and ammunitions that we need for our country's defense. But let's add on to that. What else did it do? You know what it did? It drove the cost of gasoline that hurt the average American citizen. Drove it to over $4.50 a gallon, drove diesel up close to $6 a gallon, and much higher prices if you live in states like California. So not only have Americans already paid the price at the pump, also including inflation went up. We've been paying $2 billion.
So that is what Marjorie Taylor Greene had to say, and of course, hopefully you haven't forgotten that Marjorie Taylor Greene was one of Trump's strongest allies and has has strongly criticized any suggestions of financial compensation to Iran. Of course, again, I just kind of wanted to share that with you. Again, each depending on who you listen to, they try and coin the story in a way that suits the message that they're trying to pass across. Vice President JD Vance have coined and phrased that in a very different way, and of course different from how former representative Marjorie Taylor Greene is framing it, right? So more matter of messaging. So let's continue. So another reported version suggests that approximately 12 billion in frozen Iranian assets could be released before formal negotiations begin, with an additional 12 billion potentially released during the 60-day negotiation process. If true, such concessions would likely generate significant political controversy within the United States. But ultimately, the most important part of this memorandum is the 60-day negotiation window. This is where the real work begins. This is where both sides must tackle the difficult issues: the nuclear enrichment, sanction relief, frozen assets, inspections, verification mechanism, and regional security arrangements. Speaking alongside French President Emmanuel Macron today, President Donald Trump praised the agreement but also warned that if negotiations failed, the parties could return to the conflict. Let's listen to what Donald Trump had to say with regards to this.
And hopefully it's going to be a good relationship and we're going to get along. And if we don't, we go back to where we started, but I don't think that's going to be necessary. The Iran deal that we made is going to bring a lot of success to the world, because the oil was really clogged up there for a while. He would call me on occasion and say, "Come on, please, let's go with the oil prices." But the oil is coming way down, so I'm very honored by it. I want to thank you for your help. You've always been a help, and it's an honor to be with you. We had a very good conversation.
Well, there you have it. Donald Trump, of course, in his usual fashion, talks about the deal, and does not hesitate to mention that if things do not work out well, they will just go back to where they started, which is back to the fighting, or back to the destruction, back to the bombing, whichever way you want to look at it. Now, if you are skeptical about the prospects of a final peace agreement, you are not alone. My skepticism stems largely from the unpredictability of the political environment. President Trump has demonstrated an increasingly reactive and impulsive decision-making style. Events have moved him quickly, and when emotions begin driving decisions, rational calculations often suffer. It would not take much to derail this process. Another concern is the political environment surrounding him. Many of the people closest to the president appear reluctant to challenge him publicly. Figures such as Marco Rubio, Pete Hegseth have political ambitions of their own and may be hesitant to oppose Trump directly. Meanwhile, some voices that occasionally offered alternative perspective have left the administration. There is also the influence of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Netanyahu and Israeli intelligence officers reportedly played a significant role in persuading the administration to adopt a more confrontational posture towards Iran. Trump also faces pressure from powerful political donors and advocacy groups and influential lawmakers such as Lindsey Graham and Ted Cruz, all of whom have consistently advocated a tougher approach towards Tehran. The pressures could easily complicate the path to peace. Beyond politics, however, there remain serious substantive disagreements. The nuclear issue remains unresolved. Washington wants guarantees that Iran will never acquire a nuclear weapon. Iran insists on maintaining what it describes as a peaceful nuclear program and rejects demand for complete dismantling of its nuclear infrastructure. Questions regarding enrichment levels, inspections, stockpile verifications, and compliance remained unresolved. Israel also remained a major factor. Although not directly involved in these negotiations, Israeli leaders continue to express concerns regarding Iran's missile program, regional alliances, and the possibility that sanctions relief could strengthen Iran economically and militarily. Will Washington prioritize Israeli concerns, or will it prioritize what it views as America's own strategic interests? Given the unique relationship between the United States and Israel, it is difficult to imagine an agreement that completely ignores Israeli objectives. That is one reason I remain cautious about the prospect of a final treaty. Finally, there is an issue of trust, or perhaps more accurately, the lack of trust. After decades of sanctions, military confrontations, failed negotiations, and broken agreements, neither side is fully trusting of the other. Iran frequently points to the Americas' withdrawal from the JCPOA as evidence that Washington cannot be relied upon. The United States, on the other hand, continue to question Iran's transparency regarding its nuclear activity. As a result, verification mechanisms and sequencing of concessions will likely become some of the most difficult aspects of the negotiation. That said, peace is always preferable to war. My best case scenario is straightforward. The memorandum holds, the Strait of Hormuz remains open, tensions remains low, and both sides reach a limited nuclear agreement accompanied by phases of sanction relief. Frankly, that seems like the most realistic welcome. No, that seems like the most realistic outcome because neither governments appear eager to return to another costly war. Of course, there is other possibilities. Negotiations could collapse, disputes over enrichment, inspections, sanctions, and regional security could derail the process. And as President Trump himself suggests, the parties could find themselves right back where they started. For now, however, diplomacy has replaced missiles, and that alone is worth paying attention to. Thank you for watching. If you found this analysis informative, please like, subscribe, and share the channel. See you again soon.